My Gavan and Melanine, and well met indeed. I'm Arakir Garlajerth, and the head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, and welcome back to Divide and Conquer as we continue on with these round of overviews, which I shall now entitle version 1.25. Because much of what you see in all of these faction overview videos is not in your own games, because of course this is the version 2. What you're currently seeing right in front of you is the work towards version 2. I only have the build that I play YouTube campaigns on and this build. So this is work towards version 2, but version 2 isn't ready yet, so it's not technically version 2. But also, of course, it's come on enough that it's no longer version 1.2. So I think what I'm going to have to just do at the start of these, first of all, this was recorded on the 23rd of April 2017, and if you're playing on version 1.2, then do note that much of what you see here will be different. If you are playing on version 2, then this is what it will all look like. It's kind of so that I don't have to redo them for version 2. But welcome to Lindon. We shan't have any ado-ing, so let's get straight to it. What does the size of the domain and army for Lindon look like? Well, unlike your brothers in the east of Imladris, you have 4 regions. They have the 1 and you have the 4. Harlond, Southaven, Forlond, Northaven, and Mythlond, Greyhaven, and Lond Arthuran, which means Kingshaven, basically. They're pretty... Pretty big on the old havens. The size of your army at the start is very small, as they tend to be with the elves. You get a couple of units, but nothing severe. You could group all of your forces together and it wouldn't even make half an army. So you've got small units at game start. But at least you've got 4 regions. So, leader, capital, unique bodyguards, and diplomat. Your leader is, of course, Círdan the Shipwright. Oh, I've turned that on and off again. And he, as you can see from the beard, has his own unique model. That's what a standard Lindon general looks like. And that is what a standard Lindon captain looks like. Not too shabby. And there's Círdan, of course, on his own over there. Now, he has Mythlon nobles as his bodyguard. And I believe, if I am not mistaken, that he is your only unique general. Everyone else, yes, has Phalas lords. Including Gildor Inglorian, who is called Gildor the Brave, but is Gildor Inglorian. And your faction heir is Lord Galdor, who is over here. You do not have a family tree. This is not a bug. You are a Teutonic nation. And this is because Lindon was not ruled by a king or anything like that. And Círdan is kind of the de facto leader, purely because he's the only one Tolkien ever bothers to give a name to. There's no king or ruler or anything like that. So your greatest general will become your leader if your leaders die. Unfortunately, just use this as an opportunity to talk about the Teutonic family. It's not very... We don't use it in the mod as much anymore because it's notoriously crappy, for want of a better word. And for certain factions it works really well, for others it works terribly. But one of the weird, odd side bugs of it is that often your faction heir will not be promoted to be your faction leader. In many of the campaigns I've seen with the Teutonic family tree, your faction heir will remain the faction heir for the entire game, and the leader will be taken from someone else upon the leader's death. But playing as Lindon, it's very unlikely that Círdan will die. In battle, I mean. Your capital is, of course, Mythlond, the Grey Havens, and from the haven itself, you train your diplomat. Now, this is the same situation as Umbar, which is why it's quite nice that they lead on from one another, actually, isn't it? Because the haven is just the 3rd tier of your port. Or 4th tier, rather, sorry. You cannot build this anywhere else except for Umbar. So you can build the haven in Mythlond and you can build it in Umbar. And Umbar have the same thing. They can build it in Umbar and they can build it in your capital, in Mythlond. So that's where your diplomat comes from. The nearest other recruitment place for a diplomat is if you were to take Thorin's Halls from the Blue Mountains. Then you would get diplomats from there. Of course, bribery has been totally removed from version 2, so there shouldn't be diplomat armies swanning around, which is very, very nice indeed. So, Rebel expansion then. Well, you actually get quite a few choices. Remember, this is at turn 2 already, so the turn 1 autos have taken place. Oh, and allow me just as well to say that I will, again, include a small little modding overview at the end of the campaign section of this. So if you're just there for the battle bit, you can click the link below, but we'll get to that in a moment. So Rebel expansion, you can head south into the remnants of the Blue Mountains, Buzzradum. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment as well. You can also head down to Karas Orod Selk, which means the city of the roots of the mountain, which is a mouthful, but in Sindarin sounds pretty cool. From there as well, Cor Willishar, if you can beat possibly the Breelanders to the new Wildmen Mott and Bailey, or Keep as they are now known. And of course you can also race the Breelanders to Undertowers. Now I appreciate Undertowers wasn't actually established until the 4th Age, after the fall of Sauron, and it wouldn't have been a Hobbit village at this time, but it's an excuse to use the nice Hobbit model again, and it just fits. So that's why that's there. So, but you can also head north. This region, Perth and Loon, often gets ignored by the dwarves. I'm not entirely certain why. And Caras Calanan is almost certainly up for grabs for yourself. City of 4 waters, or sparkling waters, that means. Sparkling waters, I think. Yeah, because Canad is 4. I'm thinking of this town, Caras Nernaled, which means 3 waters, because of the 3 rivers that are near it. Anywho, right, so that's Rebel expansion. So your neighbours in diplomacy. Well, you are neighbouring, of course, the Blue Mountains. They are your only actual bordered nation. So you share a border with the Blue Mountains. In terms of your allies, though, you're only allied to Bree and Imladris. You're not allied to the Northern Dunedain, crucially, and you're not allied to Ered Luin. Now, this is to allow the player to have some freedom. Ered Luin and you have good relations at game start, but you can go to war with them if you want. And also, something to note for version 2 when it comes out, if you're playing on version 2, not 1.2, the garrisons at Garth Heligoth and Ostgelon have been increased. Now, this means that the AI will not target these first of all if it can help it. So there's now about a 50-50 chance that if you play as Lindon, Ered Luin might attack you straight away. I did a test campaign a few days ago, in fact, just to check this out, just to do a test campaign, and I always choose Lindon because they're an easy one to do a test campaign for, because you don't have to affect the world and it still plays out relatively the same way. And Ered Luin attacked me on turn 10. So there's a chance Ered Luin will now attack you instead of go for these rebel garrisons. And I did think about whether or not that should be a thing. And I decided, you know what? Hell, yes, it should. Because as we'll cover when we get to tips and difficulty, Lindon is dull. Well, no, I'm using dull to be synonymous with easy, where it's not. Lindon is fun, and I'm sure I would absolutely love it. But anyway, we'll get to that in a moment. So your enemies are only Angmar, and they're miles away. So you've got such a simple, peaceful start. So economy and buildings then, well, you are the elves, and of course in version 2 elves have no restrictions anymore. You can upgrade castles, there are no problems with that. So you get the full complete package of construction all the way up to large city, although as you can see the large city now requires the Builders Guild house, which is part of the Master Builders line. You get a Builders Hall, a Master Builders Hall, and a Builders Guild house. I should blur the edges really so that it blends with the background a bit, but so those are your mason buildings. There's the Builders Hall, and they reduce costs. Other than that, guild-wise, you get what all elves get. So you get your History Guild, which gives you an experience bonus to troops, population growth bonus. It's just an all-rounder. It gives military and financial boosts. You get the, it's not really a guild, but the Sculptor's Workshop, which is an incredibly expensive building that gives you a huge income, a population bonus, and a cost reduction. That is because, of course, as I mentioned with Imladris, the elves had a sort of strange bug whereby they would just stop growing at a certain point. And it wasn't scripted or anything, they would just stop growing, and I couldn't for the life of me work out why. So I countered it by just making this building available. You also get the Warriors Guild, which gives you your melee weapon bonus. And the third tier for the elves gives you Celebrimborian Plate, which allows you to upgrade even your Elder Rinways if memory serves. Now, they won't visually change their look, but you at least give them that extra armor, which people really, really, really like. So. Economy-wise, you can make quite a bit of money owing to the large presence of wine in the lands of Lindon, but more importantly, elves tend to come with this, a silk farm. And silk is one of the game's more profitable resources, and there's quite a few silk farms dotted around Lindon, so you can earn quite a bit of money. So you shouldn't really be in the shouldn't be too poor for too long. So then, what scripts affect Lindon? Absolutely none. You have no scripts that you can set out to attain. There is one script that will affect you, but there are none that you can affect, if that makes sense. So you can't. There are no scripts for you to personally head for. The only script you have to be wary of is around turn 100, the Umbarim, the forces of Umbar may well rear their ugly heads. And it's a minor annoyance, really, given how powerful Lindon are, but it's something for you to watch out for. So do note that you do have to be cautious around turn 100. Umbar will attack you. Other than that, of course, you get a garrison in Mithlond, and I believe Mithlond only. You'll also get one in Imladris, Caddis Galathon, Dolguldur, and Thranduil's Halls, but you're very unlikely to make it over there, so wouldn't worry too much. You'll also get... no, elves don't get a garrison anywhere other than those 4 regions, because you're elves. So what key map changes have affected Lindon? Well, as I say, in version 2, Oskelon and Garth Helagoth have both got larger garrisons than you would probably have remembered, so there is that to watch out for. Differences from 0.52, one of the Hobbit regions has gone. There's now only 4 of them, whereas in 0.52 there were 5. I think that's about it. Oh, the addition of Bregost from 0.52. So that has been added since 0.52. And then we come to this, which I said I'd talk about in a moment. As many people have stated, and as many people are very fond of quoting to me, it is suggested that the dwarves of the Ered Luin actually lived on the southern side of the Gulf of Lune. This is where they are supposed to have lived in their ongoing survival. And people always also ask, why doesn't Buzzradum start as belonging to Ered Luin? And the answer to both of those questions is one where gameplay takes precedent over lore. Because the AI cannot handle having its domain split in 2. So it was different when its domain was split across the entire map, because there were so many regions involved that the AI was able to just draw a line down the middle and say, no, you know what? Those are 2 separate regions, we'll deal with them separately. So they wouldn't try and send troops from Erebor all the way over to Ered Luin. They had 2 clear areas. However, when their regions are so close but separated by just a couple of regions, they just treat it as if invaders have separated them, and it meant Ered Luin would not do very much at all, because they'd spend most of the time trying to think about how they can get troops from here to support Buzzradum without annoying their allies, who were Lindon. However, now that they're no longer allied to Lindon, it would just mean that 100% of the time they would attack Lindon, because they would see Lindon as separating them from their other holding. Now, why don't Ered Luin just start in the south? And that is because Ered Luin are the counter to Angmar. Now, we know that Angmar fall, but the way that the game is set up, Angmar should fall. And Ered Luin are the ones that ensure that. Without Ered Luin's presence, Angmar absolutely walk all over the northern Dunedain and Bree. So Ered Luin need to be on the northern side, or Angmar just has no counter. And if they were on the southern side, they would annihilate Enedwyth every time. I've seen Ered Luin attack Enedwyth on 2 occasions throughout all of my campaigns, and both times they absolutely annihilate them. And I really mean annihilate them. They take it to a whole new level. So Ered Luin on the southern side would not be very good. So it's gameplay. So that's why Ered Luin aren't in Buzzradum, which is more important for the Ered Luin overview, I suppose, but it affects Lindon a bit more, because this is now a rebel region for you. So then, tips and difficulty playing as Lindon. This is what I mean. This section is a joke. Lindon is hands down the game's easiest faction. And I would fight any of you that suggests otherwise, to be honest. And I'll tell you the reasons for why. Elves are the game's most powerful all-rounders. So their archers tend to be even better in melee than other nations' best melee troops. So they are complete all-rounders. So the dwarves, for example, have excellent heavy infantry, but they have terrible range options and they have terrible cavalry. Whereas the elves cover every base. They've got good cavalry, good archers, good melee, and great armor-piercing options. So the elves are brilliant. So that's the first reason that it's so easy. The second reason is you start miles away from any natural border. And you don't have to get involved against Angmar to know that Angmar will fall. Now, maybe 8 times out of 10, Angmar will actually get the drop on Northern Dunedain and Bree fast enough that Ered Luin then can't handle them, and you might have to step in. Well, that is actually what we're going for with the high garrisons in Gelon and Garth Helagoth. These are here purely to slow down the AI Ered Luin, because they have to build up more troops before they can take these regions, which gives Angmar a bit more time to focus on the Northern Dunedain. That's the point of these 2 boosts. So, but all of this means that you have no natural enemies. Enedwyth will very unlikely to attack you. Very unlikely to attack you. We've set them to hate you, so that they should come for you, but the disparity between your troops and their troops is such that they normally don't chance it. Additionally, your 4 starting regions are, as you can already see, very well connected with trade right off the bat. You're making a lot of money from these 4, and you can boost that money still further. And you're so far away that works 2 ways. So you're far away from any enemy, which means that you can pick who you attack, and it doesn't threaten your heartland. And that is the second point. It doesn't threaten your heartland. No one is going to attack you. It'll be you attacking other people. So Lindon really is the easiest campaign. If, like, Enid Wythe was in this location, I don't think it would be the easiest campaign because their troops aren't really good enough. But add the Elven troops onto the safe start, and you have one of the game's easiest campaigns. So, that is the campaign overview of Lindon. I will now just discuss major modding changes that I can show you on the campaign map, and then I will jump into the battle map to look at Lindon's new Sindar units, or new look for their Sindar units for version 2, and just their general roster. So then, major changes that you can expect that may well be revised a bit, but not overly. First, as I've already mentioned, Oskelon and Garth Heligoth have now got large garrisons. So has Witherboard. Witherboard has a huge garrison, and so does Varfest. Now, these are strategically here because Varfest's large garrison means that Mordor will now focus on Gondor rather than trying to take Varfest, which allows Rhûn more of Rovanion and means Mordor don't spread themselves out against 3 different enemies, Rohan, Gondor and Dorwinion. The Witherboard change, the dwarves no longer get Witherboard in the turn 1 auto expansion, as you can quite clearly see. Instead, they now get Talathang, the new region in the Iron Foothills. Witherboard now acts as a total buffer, and it stops the dwarves from focusing on the Misty Mountains, which in turn buffs them substantially. So the Misty Mountains should survive a lot longer now. Also, because even with the changes we have made to Rhûn, whereby they start off a bit weaker, they will still dominate Dorwinion in almost every game. And once they do get these regions behind them, they are then more than a match for Dale and Erebor. But Erebor will at least fight better if they're not focusing on trying to take down the Misty Mountains. Additionally, Dol Guldur no longer gets Dor Norhak, which needs a garrison. Instead, they now get Bur Alj, which is there to stop Dale from coming south into this region. However, it may well just mean that Dale do come south into this region, and Bur Alj may need to be given to Thranduil's realm, but I'm trying, first of all, giving it to Dol Guldur, so this one may be subject to change. Other key changes are Gondor no longer get Ost Ithil in the turn 1 auto, and they no longer start with Eastern Osgiliath. Eastern Osgiliath in this actual time period belonged to Mordor. It was held by the Uruks. They had overrun Ithilien some time ago, and this whole region belonged to Mordor. However, we don't want to just give Mordor Eastern Osgiliath at the start, because that gives them just way too much of a boost. So instead, it starts as Rebel, which means Gondor and Mordor go at each other a lot more over Caer Andros until someone finally takes Osgiliath. And it's normally Mordor. Rohan no longer get Tirith Anduin either, and again, I need to put a garrison in it. Why did they make it so that these regions didn't have garrisons? It just does not make sense to me. Because if you play as Dol Guldur, you wouldn't have auto-expanded into Dor Norhak, which means you would have just taken this settlement without any fight. It's just baffling to me. Anyway, Tirith Anduin no longer joins Rohan. And the key change, which some of you may already have noticed, and it's relevant right now on screen in 2 ways, and pat yourself on the back if you've noticed it before I get there, and that is that the Ents no longer exist as a faction. And currently they have the Falkreath symbol as their rebel faction. So Treebeard's Hill now has 4 units of Ents in it, so you can still fight the Ents. They're just no longer a faction. I don't understand why they were a faction, because the script that is related to them does not require them to be their own faction. They can just be the Slave Nation, which is the name of the rebels. The rebels in the files are called slaves. So why they didn't just make them the Slave Nation, I don't know. There was just a script that was dedicated to stopping the Ents doing anything as an actual faction, whereas it would have been far easier just to not have them as a faction. So they've been removed. This now just belongs to the rebels. Additionally, I'm currently floating the idea in the new DaC sub-forum, which is linked below on all videos from this point out. I encourage you to join the sub-forum, get involved. It is a sub-forum totally related to Divide and Conquer. So there are now threads for bugs, there are threads for discussion, there are threads for announcements. It's far easier to make your way around. But I'm currently floating the idea, and it's obtained an awful lot of support, in that the Isengard Ent attack script is probably going to be removed from the game. Which does mean that the Isengard overview video is slightly outdated. And this is because the Ents are so notorious for crashing the game, but also because the AI Isengard no longer does very well, and a large chunk of that is the fact that their capital city gets annihilated in most campaigns by the Ents. And so I'm very keen to just cut it. So if you want to fight against the Ents, you can. You go over to Treebeard's Hill, you'll find 4 units of Ents there, and there's some ambush ready in the forest, and you'll fight them. And then if you're playing as Isengard and you capture Treebeard's Hill, this is now where you build the logging camp. You no longer build it in Isengard itself, which I thought made thematic sense, because Isengard is not on the border of Fangorn. Fangorn is a little way around the corner, so it made more sense to me. So that has changed as well. And then a major key change at the moment, although they're still going through revisions, is the new city models for the evil men. Umbar will get new ones of their own, but at the moment they share Harad's, I think. But this is what the runic city now looks like. So Mistrand is its city. So there is one tier above that. But all of them, they've lost a lot of the stuff that made them look specifically Muslim rather than specifically Middle Eastern, sorry. So they've lost the minarets. Are they called minarets? Are they the towers? I think they're called minarets. I can't remember. So they've lost the minarets anyway, and they've lost a lot of the dome roofing, and now they just have a more sort of deserty feel to them. But additionally, the cities are different depending on whether you are Rune, who have this kind of rud? It's because I'm thinking mud and red together in one word. This red muddy texture, or if you are playing as Harad, who have a far more sandstony kind of desert rock texture, because obviously Harad is more desert and Rune is more grassland. So those are new from the Elite Dwarf once again. And there's just a few of them there. And as you can see, the minarets and the orbs and everything have all gone. So as I say, Umbar will get their own ones, but at the moment they just have the default one. Umbar are going to get a hybrid Black Numenorian. We're going to play on the Black Numenorian theme with Umbar a lot more, so that will come. I don't think there's anything else. I've edited once again the effect of the file that edits the income that a settlement receives, the order that a settlement has, and the population growth of settlements in an attempt to lower order across the board, so it'll be a little harder to keep your settlements happy. You won't see 300% population order, public order anymore, which is a joke. So now you have to actually keep some garrison troops in there to keep your population above 100, which is better. And religious differences now have a huge impact. Additionally, I've kind of lowered income across the board a bit for all settlements, AI and human. And growth I've also attempted to lower. So it now just puts more weight on key buildings. So the building that it directly affects growth, which I can show you for Lindon. For example, a building which directly affects growth, like the Sculptor's Workshop, that will have a big bonus to your growth. Whereas farming no longer has as much of a bonus. Some of you may not know, but farms have an off-screen, behind-the-scenes bonus to settlement growth. And that's now been lowered. Additionally, with like income, for example, mines now give more money than they used to, but overall income elsewhere is a little lower. So there's now more key ways to get money than there were before. It's not massively different, but there's just slight differences. So those are the key modding changes at the moment behind the scenes. And so we can head over to Lindon's battle map and see what their units look like. Welcome to the battle map side. So a quick overview of Lindon shows you that, like most elves, they are small but elite. Your choices for your roster are not very much at all, not very many choices at all, but every single unit here is outrageously good for its class. So even your militia are unbelievably good. Now, once again, let me add a disclaimer that the units are lined up dependent upon their stats rather than their actual barracks event timing, if that makes sense. That's the way that I'm now going to do it. So this gap here represents the key jump between your lower tier and your upper tier, but that does not necessarily mean that, say, for example, the Mariners, they may come after the barracks event. But I think this way is better so that when the barracks event kicks in, you at least know which units are kind of comparable rather than when they're available, if that makes sense. I think this way is better. So these units all share similar stats. and they increase as they go up, and with this line here being the probable barracks event, but more importantly just the key jump between troop abilities. So, let's dive straight in. Now, Lindon, I don't think since 0.52 have any new units, save for the Mariners, but they may even have been in 0.52, but I will just give them a bit more attention. So, the Teleri Swordsmen are your start, and these are virtual clones of the Quendi of Imladris. But they do have their own name, they're Teleri. They also look far less armoured, don't they? But rest assured, elven clothing is phenomenally useful as armour. But they're elves. The key points of all elves: their morale is always very good, their stamina is always quite good, their defense is always very high, their attack is always very high, their charge is always very good. They are excellent at everything they do, but they cost so much, and their replenishment rate is really low. So you get the Teleri Swordman unit like once every 12 turns or something, and this is your militia tier. So small elite armies are very much the order of the day for the elves. So Teleri Swordmen are your introductory unit. They are supported by Teleri Archers, who similar sort of stats but missiles. Now this is your entry-level archer, and it does as much damage missile-wise as a human ranger. It just has slightly less range and less missiles. But all elves, of course, are phenomenal archers, with the Woodland Realm having the best archers, because that's the way that we've done it. Well, the Woodland Realm having the most choice for archers, I suppose, is a better word. But all elves are phenomenal archers. Arguably, the actual best archer unit in game, with every single thing considered, is the Elder Inway Archer. But that's up to yourselves. There's also the Noldorin Guard, but because they're not trainable, I don't like to count unique bodyguards as standard units, because you can't actually train them. You only get 3 units of them, and then that's it. But anyway, so the Teleri Archers support the Teleri Swordmen. Additionally, you get Teleri Riders. Now these, I believe, I have actually placed... No, they are lined up really well. So these are Teleri Riders, and this is what they look like. They have a slightly different look and design to the Teleri Swordmen. They have chainmail on already, whereas I believe, don't quote me on this, I believe the Archers and the Swordmen upgrade to look like this. But those are your Teleri Riders with cool axes and shields. So as you can see, they're more melee cavalry than hit-and-run cavalry because they don't have spears. They don't have a secondary weapon either. So whilst their charge and their attack is good and it's high, a spear has a bonus when used on a cavalry that an axe doesn't. So their charge is very good, but they will then do a lot of damage once they're in there. And with their high defense as well, it means that they are just as suited for this long attacking, which is something that the cavalry isn't really meant to do, but these cavalry do it better than others. Most cavalry you always want to cycle charge. So also in the early stages, but units that you will really want to rely on are the Lindon Long Spears. Lindon Long Spears used to have a halberd animation or a two-handed axe animation, I think, but they are now dedicated pikemen. They use a pike animation, they are just pikemen, which is why their attack is low and their defense is low, but for pike stats, these are actually really good. And long spears are phenomenally useful, but they only come from your 4 starting regions. They are your first AOR unit, and but they are very, very good. Very, very powerful indeed. And as you can see, they do have armour underneath their clothing, which is interesting. Normally you'd wear it the other way around. You're also supported in the early game with the Lindar Mariners. Or you should be stat-wise. Lindar Mariners are an interesting one. They're faster than most other units, so they run very quickly. And they have a really high attack and a very high charge. But they don't have armor piercing and they don't have a two-handed weapon. So they are strike infantry, but they are one of the game's few sword strike infantry. They're only available on the coast, as you can see just there. Otherwise they have elven stats. They're good at hiding in woods, but other than there's nothing else remarkable about them other than their really high attack and high charge. They really are strike infantry that just aren't effective against armor, which is very, very useful. So your pikemen will certainly hold the line, supported with Teleri Swordmen, and then the Lindar Mariners will do the flanking and rear charging along with the cavalry. So your early game, you've really got an answer to everything, which is why elves are so good. Even though you don't have much choice, you do have an answer for everything. So then we jump up and we come to the Sindar units, and this is what they all now look like. They used to be different, as was seen in my ongoing Angmar campaign. Remember, it's April of 2017 when I recorded this. So you can see what they look like. They're old style in that one, but here, this is what they look like in version 2 and beyond. They are based on the image of Turin Turumba from the cover of The Children of Hurin. That it's a famous image, and they are based on that. Hummingbird used that as his inspiration, which is very cool. So there are 3 units of Sindar. There are Sindar Spearmen. Sindar meaning grey elves. They're just solid, dependable spearmen. As you can see, those are their stats there. Those are their other bits and bobs. They are solid spearmen, very powerful, very good. I mean, 24 is better already than the elites of Enid Wythe, Angmar. Like they're already outclassing their neighbours. There also are the Sindar Guards. Now, the Sindar Guards wield axes, and this brings me on to just a minor lore point, in that it is stated that the Sindar of Beleriand favoured using axes. It was their favourite weapon. Because I've been asked quite a few times, why are the elves using axes? That's a dwarven weapon, they should have swords and spears. But no, the Sindar favoured axes. So much so that one of their alternative names was Axe Elves. That was genuinely one of the names that they were that they went under. So the Sindar Guards are axe wielding, and they are effective against armour. Your first effective against armour unit. Even the Teleri Riders, unfortunately, are not. Yeah, it's because you can't get as much of a swing, one would wonder. Oh, mostly it's because otherwise they'd be outrageously powerful. So the Sindar Guards are effective against armour. So again, they are a strike infantry unit, but because of their high defence, they can also easily hold the line, which is something that the Lindon Mariners, for example, wouldn't do as well as the long spears or the swordmen. So the Sindar Guards best used to flank around and attack the enemy. And finally, the Sindar tier, there are also archers with very cool wooden longbows. And they have a 9 missile attack. They're outrageously good. They really are outrageously good. There is nothing more to say about them. But as you can see, the recruitment cost is steadily going up. And before we're even at your uber elite tier, you're already paying over 1,000. They're very expensive, but one unit can really, really help your army. So then we come to your elites. Now these, as many of you know, are shared with Imladris. There is no difference save from the Sindar version having blue capes and silver armour, and the Imladris version having the armour from the prologue of the Fellowship of the Ring film, the gold armour. So we'll start with our Eldarinwe Swordmen. Eldarinwe Swordmen, there's their stats there. They're outrageously good. These 3 units in this tier, or 4 units including the cavalry, are just outrageously good. They are arguably the best units in the game for this tier, all things considered. Their availability, cost, their damage, their defense, their morale, all these things. They have... I'll have to check if they have lock morale, because that's written in the wrong place. But they may... I do believe they do have lock morale. If I can remember. I'm pretty sure the Eldarinwe have locked morale. There's your spearmen. Obviously, lower charge, lower attack, but a higher... defense, as you would expect. So the swordmen do the flanking, the spearmen do the holding. Now, as I have mentioned before, spearmen do actually get a negative bonus against infantry, but they hold the line incredibly well because they tend to have high defense stats, and that's true here as well. But do note that the swordmen can hold the line just as well. But the presence of a shield, gives a huge boost, and high defense is better for just holding. They, again, locked morale, excellent morale as it is, so there's your Eldarinwe spearmen. And then finally, you're supported by Eldarinwe archers with an 11 missile attack, 13 melee, and 25 defense. They are better swordsmen than many enemies' swordsmen. They're really, really good. And again, locked morale, very high accuracy, 210 meter range, 32. They get a bonus against wargs, which is very interesting, as do the Eldarinwe swordmen, actually. All elves get a negative effect if they're fighting in a desert. They get a benefit if they are fighting in mountains or in forests, and they are unaffected by grassland. So they are bonus in forest and snow, negative in deserts, and they're unaffected by grassland. So on this map, for example, their stats would be exactly as you see them. If we were fighting on a desert, they would be negatively affected. And if we were fighting in a forest and in the mountains, then they would get bonuses. Additionally, all units, something that I've never spoken of, I don't think, but there is something called a heat stat, or a stat heat. And what this does is it negatively affects your unit time to a certain degree depending on the number that's assigned to it, between normally 1 to about 8. And the higher that number, the worse the unit is in heat. So not only do you get a negative if you fight in deserts, but you additionally, your troops get steadily worse the further south you go. Because the heat map of the game, which many of you will never have seen, is just a steadily progressing line. So the top is cold and the bottom is the hottest, and it's basically varied perfectly between those two. So there aren't hot spots or anything like that. It is just a continuous line steadily getting hotter and hotter and hotter. So the further south you go, the worse all of your units become. And likewise for the well, not likewise, because it doesn't have a negative effect. So the Haradrim are at their peak when they're fighting in the heat, because they're not affected by heat really at all. But then when they're fighting in the cold, that doesn't swing the other way, and it doesn't make them worse. So when you're fighting the Haradrim in their homelands, you are really up against it. Everything about in the files is working against you, if you are the elves, or if you're really anyone north of Gondor. So finally then, those are your elites. Oh, sorry, let me do with the cavalry. Elder Rinway Lancers. Elder Rinway Lancers are one of the game's best cavalry. Something I have said many times in this video is best this, best that, and it's true. The elves are the best at everything, at each tier. Elder Rinway Lancers have a 12 attack with a 15 charge. They have a secondary weapon which does 15 damage. So not only do they do a brutal attack on their charge, but they then follow that up with outrageously high attack for the continuing battle. Additionally, elven mounts, or elven cavalry, or all elves in fact, are faster than everyone else. Elves are the fastest units in the game. Their move speed stat, or move speed mod, is higher than anyone else. And the elven horse has a slightly higher mass than most other horses, so they punch a bit deeper. And then finally, your two Ubers and then the top. Well, your two Uber elites, the ones that you will likely use, are of course the Mithlon Nobles. And Mithlon Nobles are amazing. They inspire your troops. They have a 20 attack, 12 charge for an infantry, 12 charge. They have a 38 total defense. But they only come from Mithlond, which is why this is very much your Uber elite. And the gentlemen next to them are Imladris' Uber elite. Their morale again is locked. Sorry, I've knocked the desk. They also get a bonus against wargs. Almost all elves get a bonus against wargs just because they hate wargs. So it's more of a hatred than a raw bonus. But the nobles come from Mithlond only. They're barracks event late game units, and they're really powerful. These two units are in the top 5 best units in the game, and they're both for the Imladris and Lindon. And they really are. These two really are. Stat wise and what they do, these are the best 2 units in the game for infantry. So the reason I say the Smiths of Eregion are very much an Imladris unit is because they only come from Eregion. You need to conquer Eregion, which is something that as Mithlond you're very unlikely to do, and Imladris are very unlikely to conquer Mithlond. So that's why you don't tend to get each other's units, but you can train both. And with the changes to the Gwaith y Myrdain, which is no longer a guild and is just an upgradable building, it's very easy to get these now. You don't have to build a load of barracks. You don't have to hope that the guild's you don't have to hope that the AI has not destroyed the guild. But the Smiths of Eregion come from the Gwaith y Myrdain, and these units are mental. This unit is possibly, I'm going to put it out there, I'm going to go one more than I've been. This unit is arguably the best unit in the game, full stop. Take out things like the elephants, because in the right way, obviously, Mumakil are outrageous. Sauron is a beast. The Balrog is a beast. Take those out, and this is very much probably the best unit in the game. Although, to be honest, even including Sauron, Mumakil, and the Balrog, this is probably the best unit in the game. They have an 18 attack, which is also effective against armor, so they just slaughter anything. They have an 8 charge, but most importantly, they have a 42 defense. 42. They inspire nearby troops, they can hide in the trees, excellent stamina, locked morale, but they require Eregion. They're a really late game unit. You've probably won the campaign before you even bring these to bear, which is a bit of a shame really. But with the changes to the Myrdain, actually I don't think that's as true anymore. They cost an outrageous amount of money, obviously, and because they're 42 defense stat, half of that is armor only, or more than half of that is armor only. The only real thing you've got to watch out for is siege equipment and enemy armor piercing. Oh dear, sorry, the smoke alarm downstairs is going off. I can hear it buzzing. Right, so finally then, the Phalas Lords. Someone must have burnt their toast. The Phalas Lords are the new and improved bodyguard of Imladris. These are courtesy of... I've forgotten his name because they were added months ago now. But he managed to get permission to edit the Imladris units, which is incredibly rare and very hard to do. And he was given permission to edit these, and then he allowed DaC to use them. So these are the new Phalas Lords for version 2 and beyond. Possibly they might be in 1.2 already, actually. But Phalas Lords are just really good spearmen. So they no longer have the pikes, which means they're no longer restricted to constantly being in pike wall formation, which is good. And they are really good. 35 defense, 8 charge, 15 attack, excellent morale. They're really very, very powerful. They're very small in number, obviously, but they're not small in number enough that they get stun locked. So always watch out for these. They can survive for so bloody long. And I can attest to that, let me tell you. So now then, the big reveal. Who is going to be next week's faction overview? Well, I can show you by giving all of these to the AI. And starting the game. And can you already tell? Next week's faction overview is going to be Harad. So we're up against the Haradrim. There's the Mumakil lumbering around in the background. Oh, the catapult's firing. Harad have been changed significantly for version 2. And that is going to show in next week's overview video. They've also been changed significantly from 0.52, so as I've been banging on about in my own campaigns, all of the stats of all of Harad's units have been edited. So next week's overview might be slightly longer because we have an awful lot more to talk about Harad than we used to. So they have been changed so much from 0.52 and even from 1.2 that I'll give them a full real overview, so it may be about an hour, unfortunately. That you can see them all running around, threatening us, the Archer Cav. Now, the only other thing to mention, though, is because Harad have been changed so much, if you're playing version 1.2 and you watch the Harad overview, you are almost certainly, unless you actually listen, you are certainly going to be like, hang on, that doesn't look anything like my Harad. What on earth is this? And that's because, of course, next week you will see version 2's version of Harad. It will not be version 1.2's. There is nothing about version 1.2 really left for Harad other than the stat changes, but even those are new to you all. So they will require a new overview. Oh, the Mumakil throwing the Muhad Beastmasters out of the way. Oh, straight into the sides of the Eregian Smith. Oh, I hate you. Now, Mumakil look big, beastly and terrifying, but they're actually surprisingly easy to kill. Siege equipment downs them like there is no tomorrow. And armor piercing and javelins are very, very good as well. Now, Mumakil are actually just elephants, so pikemen also get a bonus. But your best bet really is range. Bring them down with siege. Although, look, the Smiths of Eregion are showing that Mumakil at the back. What for? And it's gone down. Buggy as hell. It's kind of levitating above the ground. We're probably getting slaughtered, by the way. I should just add. I should just add. There's a couple of new units for Harad as well, which we can cover. There aren't really any visual changes for Harad. Although they've got really cool swords. Who gave them those swords? Is that what they always had? Or did you do that, Hummingbird? Or did Zarathos do that? Oh, I can't remember. I didn't realise their swords look like that. Oh, that's because I'm playing version 1.15. And in 1.15, they don't look like this. As far as I can recall. In the campaigns, anyway. That's a cool sword, though. So Harad will be next week's overview. But I hope you've enjoyed this Lindon one and a little look into what changes there are in the mod as well. But I think that will conclude it. So for now, and until we speak again, dear friends, Navahar Niden Pedamad Melunin, and farewell.